Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you everyone for joining. This is a webinar for Secret Atlas. This is a webinar for for all of our booked guests for the Svalbard season ahead, so 2025. So yeah, everyone in this call is booked on one of our micro expeditions this year. And yeah, I can see a lot of familiar names on the panel, so hello everyone. But for those of you who haven't met me, so my name is Lewis Morecambe. I am one of the expedition specialists here at Secret Atlas. And also on the call tonight, we have Cindy, who is our customer service and also an expedition specialist. So I imagine a lot of you have already been in touch with Cindy, or if you haven't, you will be in the coming months. But yeah, the season is drawing closer, so it's a brilliant time to get you prepared for your upcoming trip. And yeah, we're very excited here at Secret Atlas for this Svalbard season. Our ship, the MV Freya, has actually just gone out on her first expedition in Svalbard with a photography group. So it's a very early expedition. Lots of ice, lots of snow, but yeah, the ships are getting ready to welcome you on board. We'll start tonight with a little bit of housekeeping, so some webinar house rules. So yeah, everyone, your microphones and cameras are automatically switched off, so don't worry, we can't hear or see you, but hopefully you can hear and see me. But as you have questions throughout the webinar, there is a Q&A, a chat box, so please feel free to pop some questions in there. And as said, Cindy is on the Q&A chat tonight, so she will get back to your questions. Any questions she doesn't get back to, I will get back to at the end of the presentation. So we're going to start with understanding Svalbard. So where is Svalbard? So I'm sure you're all aware Svalbard is an archipelago located off the north of Norway. It's quite a distance from Norway. It's about 1,000 kilometers from Norway. But yeah, it's very close to the North Pole. And the focus on a lot of our expeditions is to try and get as far north up onto sort of the northwest corner. And then in the summer months, as the ice conditions allow, we'll try and push a little bit further north, visit the ice edge, visit the pack ice, and then later in the summer, some of our expeditions will be doing a full circumnavigation of the islands. But yeah, Svalbard, it is under Norway's sovereignty. So for people arriving, for you all arriving into Svalbard, so I imagine, and I know many of you have already secured your flights, but for those of you who haven't secured your flights, so Longyearbyen is the main town in Svalbard. And this is where you will be flying into. This is a diagram of a picture of the airport here. The airport is served by two airlines, so Norwegian Air and Scandinavian Airlines, or SAS Airlines, sometimes it's referred to. Now, one question we often get is who should I go with? What's a better airline? To be honest with you, they're very much like for like a lot of airlines these days. So I would suggest booking the flights which best suit your timings and your schedule. But for most of you, well, everyone, to get to Longyearbyen, you do have to connect in either Oslo or Tromsø. So yeah, connecting in Oslo, if you're coming from North America, Australia, New Zealand, I do recommend spending, you probably need to spend a night in Oslo, but it's a beautiful city. It's home to the Fram Museum, and I always recommend our guests, if they've got time in Oslo, is to go to the Fram Museum. The Fram Museum, it's home to the Fram ship. And if you don't know, the Fram ship, it's one of the strongest wooden ships ever built. And she was one of the very early ships to explore the polar regions, and she set the record for furthest north and furthest south, so she did explore both poles. So yeah, the majority of you will be transiting through Oslo, and some of you will transit through Tromsø. And I know from speaking to some of our guests, some of you are doing a pre and post excursion in Lofoten Islands, which is a beautiful part of the world. But yeah, the flight times to Longyearbyen to Svalbard. So from Oslo, it's a 3.5 hour flight, and from Tromsø it's a little bit shorter, an hour and 40 minutes. Some considerations when you are booking your flights. So we do always recommend that you arrive at least 1 day in advance, just in case of any flight delays. You don't want to miss the departure of the ship. And when you're booking your return flight, most people do fly out on the disembarkation day, but you are free to stay. We'll typically disembark in the morning around 9 a.m. But the ship actually does dock into Longyearbyen during the night. So if you do have an earlier flight departure, we can accommodate that as well. And for those of you who have a flight later in the afternoon, don't worry, you're not going to be sitting around at the airport all day. We will pick you up. We've got our offices in Longyearbyen, so we will drop your luggage at the offices, and then you have the day to explore Longyearbyen, the town, go for some lunch, and then we'll put on a transfer to the airport later in the evening. For those who haven't booked your flights already, and you need a bit of help, do feel free to get in touch. We have a flight partner at AECO who can manage your flight bookings for you. And yeah, the last consideration is we always recommend a flexible ticket. Obviously, plans sometimes do change, so having that flexible ticket will allow for any unexpected situations. And for Svalbard, so a question we get a lot is do you need a visa? So Svalbard is actually a visa-free zone, but as I say, you will be transiting through Norway, and dependent on your passport and where it's issued, you may need a visa to enter Norway. For most Europeans, UK, North Americans, Australians, it's not a problem, but if you're potentially traveling on an Indian passport or a Chinese passport, you will need a visa to enter Norway. And it's important because you will be entering Norway multiple times to get a multi-visit visa. But if you have any questions about visas, again, do get in touch with us and we can point you in the right directions. Now, as I say, so Longyearbyen is a great place to spend 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights. You can easily fill 3 nights in Longyearbyen. It's home to some incredible museums. So I always recommend guests, the 2 main museums in town are the Svalbard Museum, which is a fantastic museum all about the history of Svalbard, but it also gives you a little glimpse into what you're about to see on your cruise, with some fantastic wildlife exhibits, and there's some really thought-provoking exhibits on climate change in that museum and how it is infecting Svalbard and the wider planet. So I definitely recommend that. And for those of you who are into your polar history, so we do recommend visiting the North Pole Expedition Museum as well. Both of these museums, they can be explored in sort of a morning, a few hours, so you don't need all day in the museums. But the town itself, if you are spending longer, there are some really good activities. So if you're there in sort of early season, so April and early May, there's some really good snowmobiling options. There's also husky dog sled riding, and if you're there in the summer months, so June, July, August, there are some really good hiking activities you can do from Longyearbyen. Now, Longyearbyen, you're not allowed to leave the town on your own because, of course, in Svalbard, there is the risk of running into polar bears. So you're not allowed to leave the town without a trained guide. But if you are looking to book any activities, we can put you in touch with some local companies that we recommend. And Longyearbyen, you're not going to be short on restaurant choices. There is some very good restaurants in Longyearbyen. You've got the option to try some local cuisines, which is fascinating. So reindeer does play a big part of the menu. It's local. It's one of the more sustainable options, and there's lots of freshly caught fish as well. But there's lots of vegetarian options. So there's a wide array of restaurants in Longyearbyen, and Longyearbyen is home to the world's most northern pub. So that is well worth a visit. There's also a brewery. The brewery is only open on Fridays and Saturdays, and it does need to be pre-booked because it does get busy. So if you're a beer fan, it's well worth a visit. But one of my favorite places in Longyearbyen is the Husky Cafe. It's about 2 doors down from our office, and it serves the best coffee in Longyearbyen. And it is home to retired Huskies. So you'll have the Huskies walking around the cafe, keeping you company. So it's a really, really nice place to spend a morning and grab a cup of coffee. But what can you expect to see when you are out on your expedition? So obviously, your wildlife is a huge draw. It's one of the main reasons guests book and go Secret Atlas. Our trips are very much focused on spotting, looking for wildlife, and the wildlife you can expect to see. So we all have polar bears, reindeers, Arctic foxes, and then dependent on the season you're there, so from May all the way through to August, we've got a lot of migratory seabird species. So the puffins are probably the biggest draw, but there's a number of duck species, a number of you've got little auks, you'll see them in their thousands, and they'll be nesting in Svalbard between May and August. So it's quite a sight. It can be quite noisy when we go and visit the bird cliffs, but yeah, it's a beautiful sight. And also whales. So whales, there are migratory species again to Svalbard. The most common whales that we see are going to be the beluga whales. We also see fin, minke whales, and occasionally humpbacks. And then you'll see seals in their numbers, bearded seals, grey seals. So yeah, you'll see lots of seals, and the walruses as well. You will see walruses in big numbers in the early season, so April, May, and June. You'll probably see sort of 1 or 2 on their own. But as you head into the summer months, they do start to congregate together, and you'll see them in their hundreds probably. So yeah, we'll always be looking out for wildlife, but it's not all about wildlife. It is about the landscapes and the beauty of the islands. So Svalbard, there is a lot of fjords. Being a smaller ship, we have more access into the smaller fjords, the narrower fjords, but you'll have these beautiful mountains as your backdrop. We'll be visiting glaciers. You'll see lots of different ice formations, icebergs, and the beautiful Arctic tundra. So as the summer comes out, some of the snow will be melting on the lower ground, and it is opening up, and you're starting to get your wildflowers and some local berries. So yeah, it does turn into quite a wildflower haven. And we do try and visit the pack ice. So the pack ice is the ice which is sort of drifting off the coast of Svalbard, and on some expeditions we will be going up to the ice edge as well. But there is, with ice, the ships are ice rated, so when we are in the pack ice we can cruise and break through the ice, but there is what they call fast ice, which is the ice which is fastened to the land. So it's ice touching the land. That ice is protected. So that ice is where the polar bears hunt. It's where the seals and the walruses breed as well. So we don't break that ice. We want to keep that for the wildlife. But preparing for your trip. So the packing list and the packing guide is very important. So you will be receiving a packing list and a packing guide from our customer service team at Let's Go at Secret Atlas. But this presentation will be shared with everyone after, and there are links you can click on to take you to the packing lists if you haven't seen it. But there we put this quote in. This is one of my favorite quotes. There is no such thing as bad weather, only unsuitable clothing. And being from the UK, I can safely agree with that quote. But yeah, hopefully we're gonna, in the next couple of slides, give you a few tips and a few pointers of what to pack. But Svalbard, the weather is very changeable, so we need to be well prepared and prepared for all eventualities. So that brings us to the temperatures. So most of our expeditions are happening in the summer months. So the temperatures in the summer. So when I say summer, this is probably May all the way through to August. We're looking at a temperature range of sort of 2 to 7 degrees, but that's an average. Last year we had days in the summer months where it hit probably quite worryingly 14, 15 degrees, and it's not to say it doesn't drop below that. So it's not uncommon for it to sort of be -5 as well on sort of during certain times, and especially if there's a front pushing in, and it can feel a lot chillier with the wind chill. And obviously, as we do head further north from the ship, it can get a little bit colder. So we need to be well prepared. But we do provide you with, so firstly, we provide you with the muck boots. So these are these rubber boots here. So these boots, you will be wearing them when you're making your excursions off the boat. So when you're getting in and out of the Zodiacs, especially when we make a landing, you're often stepping out of the Zodiac onto either into sort of shallow water on a beachfront, or you'll be stepping onto the ice or stepping onto snow. So these boots are designed to keep you warm, keep you dry. And I personally wear these boots all the time when I'm out on, if we're out on a hiking excursion. I find these boots comfortable and I wear them all the time. But some guests will prefer to bring their own hiking boots, and then you can change out of the rubber muck boots once we're ashore and put on your hiking boots, and the rubber boots can just stay by the Zodiacs. But we also provide you with what we call a survival suit. So the picture on the previous slide, this is the survival suit. So it's an all-in-one suit. It keeps you dry, it keeps you warm, and yeah, we definitely recommend that. It's actually mandatory for April and May trips to be wearing it when you're in the Zodiacs, but that's going to keep you warm, but you'll need some good base layers under that still. So these are our top tips for what to wear. So as I say, base layers are really key. So we tend to recommend a merino wool base layer, both sort of the top half and your bottom half. A, it's a fantastic insulator, but B, it also is, it keeps the moisture away from your skin, and it's got really good antibacterial properties as well. But typically we recommend not to be wearing cotton, or definitely not be wearing jeans when you're out on excursions. When you're on the boat, that's absolutely fine, but you want more synthetic fabrics for when you are out doing their excursions. And that is, we do recommend a mid layer. Even under the survival suits, you will need sort of a down jacket. It can be synthetic down, but just a lightweight down jacket to keep you warm as well. And that's also good when you're out deck on the boat. And then for your outer layers, so Gore-Tex, so it's a waterproof jacket, waterproof trousers. Now, if you're going to be wearing the all-in-one suits, you won't probably be wearing them. You'll just be wearing the all-in-one suit. But it's still a good idea to take a waterproof jacket, waterproof trousers, especially if you've got time in Longyearbyen before and it's a rainy day. But when you're on the boat, you have got free reign of the deck spaces, so it can be good if you want to get out. If we spot any wildlife and it's raining and you want to get out on deck, it can be good to have your waterproof jackets and over trousers as well. Now we're talking about travel logistics. So over the coming months, we will be requesting all of your flight details if we haven't done so already. But we do have our operations team. They're actually based in Longyearbyen. So about 48 hours before you arrive, our team will be reaching out to you via Longyearbyen just to confirm your transfers. But on arrival into Longyearbyen, as I say, it's a very small airport. Once you go through and collect your baggage in the baggage hall, one of the Secret Atlas team, it's either Larislava or Signa Maria, they're our colleagues who are based up in Longyearbyen. They will be there with a Secret Atlas sign looking for you, and they will transfer you to your hotel. But we also provide a transfer on the day of embarkation. So the day of embarkation, so we typically board the ship around we'll pick you up from your hotel about 3:45. So for this day, we suggest you check out of your hotel all hotels in Longyearbyen have got luggage store areas, so you can store the luggage so it's ready to go, and you can have the morning in town, go to the museums. For this day, we typically don't recommend you do any of the big excursions out of town, just in case there are any delays, but you can certainly do sort of a morning walking excursion or a short morning excursion. But yeah, we will be picking you up, but if we're not at your hotel bang on time, we are picking up 12 guests from a number of hotels in Longyearbyen, so it's probably will be picking you up somewhere between sort of 3:30 and 4 p.m, and then we will board the ship. And then insurance. So travel insurance is mandatory for our trips, because we are in the Arctic, we're in a very remote location. You need to be covered in case there are any emergencies. So we do recommend cancellation insurance, but we also recommend medical insurance. And it's very important that the medical insurance has medical evacuation. If you do have a big incident and you're on the ship and you're up in the Arctic, it can be very slow for us to turn the boat round and get back to Longyearbyen, where there is medical facilities. So most likely, if there is a big situation, it will be relying on a helicopter. So we need to see medical evacuation insurance. But not to scare you, I'm sure we've never had to call a helicopter in our 6 years of operation. So and all your staff on the ship are medically trained as well, so we can handle more minor injuries. But we've got a guide here and a checklist, so do read that in more detail. Completing your manifest. So some of you might be asking, what is the manifest? So the manifest is, we collect all of your information. So this is your passport information. We need to give that to the boat. We collect your dietary requirements, so the chef, and we can provision accordingly, your boot sizes, your flight details. So this is a form you will receive an email roughly about 3 months before your trip from Cindy, from the Let's Go at secretatlas.com account. And this will have a link to take you to the manifest. And it's a short Google form, so there's a number of questions on that. And then once that is completed, you can sit back, relax, and you will be ready for your trip. We are transitioning to away from a Google form. So if your trip is before July, it's probably going to stay on the Google form. But after July, we have a new reservation system coming. So it will look slightly different, but we'll give you details of that once that is ready. But it's very important you complete this as soon as possible, so we can prepare accordingly. Now, probably the more fun stuff. So life on board the ship. So as I say, that first day of embarkation, so we'll typically board the ship. We'll be on board for 4 p.m. And before we set sail, of course, there'll be a safety briefing. But this is when, so all of our expeditions, there's a minimum of 2 expedition guides, and these are the ones who will be planning the route, planning the itinerary, planning their excursions. So on day 1, they will sit you down and do a briefing, and they will go over a rough plan of the expedition. As you know, our itineraries are fairly flexible. It does base a lot on the weather, the sea ice conditions. So it can change from day to day. There's a plan A, there's a plan B, there's a plan C, but the expedition team will keep you posted at all times. But to give you a sense of what a typical day looks like, so typically we do a breakfast around 8 a.m. And then we'll be out on a morning excursion. So maybe around 9:30 we'll get out on the Zodiacs, or maybe a small hiking excursion. It really depends on where we're pulling into, what we've seen, what wildlife we've encountered, as to the type of excursions. And the excursions, they can last anywhere from a couple of hours up to sort of 4 hours. And then we'll be back on the boat for lunch. We'll have a nice lunch on the boat, and then again in the afternoon we'll be out on another excursion, again using the small Zodiac boats, or potentially doing some hiking excursions as well. But as I say, it's a very flexible itinerary. You'll be having briefings with the guides every day to keep you informed of the plans. Some days we might be doing a bit more cruising on the boat, and so we might only fit one excursion in, but typically we will do a number of excursions a day. And as I say, all of your meals are included on the boat, and there's snacks and drinks provided throughout the day. The meals, so breakfast and lunch tends to be a bit more buffet style, help yourself. And then the dinner is more of a formal sit down plated service. And as I say, the chef on board, great chefs on board, they will cater for any dietary requirement that you have. But I say dinner's a more formal occasion, but it's by no means, we're a very relaxed ship. There's no dress codes, so it's very relaxed, casual clothing. But apart from the daily activities, there are other bits of other activities you can get involved in. So we will be running a number of lectures on all of our trips. They'll be run by the expedition team, and the expedition team, they'll be running on geology, on wildlife, on the history of Svalbard. And if you're on a photography specific trip, there'll be photography lectures as well. So the lectures are a great source of entertainment in the evenings and when we are transiting on the boat. We have 24-hour access up into the bridge, so you're more than welcome to go up into the bridge. It's actually one of my favorite places on the ship. And personally, I'll wake up quite early every day, grab a coffee, head up into the bridge, speak to the crew, speak to the captain, the vice captain as well. They've been sailing up in the Arctic for a number of years, so they're always keen to swap a story and share stories with you. And we do try and incorporate what is known as the polar plunge. So that is diving into or jumping into the icy polar water. Now, it's not mandatory. It is an optional activity, but if you are brave enough, I strongly recommend it. And of course, on the ship, both of the ships have got a nice sauna hot tub for you to get into, and there's always an open bottle of whiskey or hot chocolate or whatever your tipple may be to warm you up after the polar plunge. But as I say, there's a number of lounge areas on the ship. So we have got on the Vikenfjord, this is the observation lounge. On the Freya, there is a sort of dining area and saloon lounge as well. But the ship, there's lots of deck space on both the Freya, Vikenfjord. Get out onto the deck. And there's lots of options for photography and just to enjoy the Arctic scenery. And then your cabins, so all of the cabins will have their own ensuite facility. The cabins are very comfortable, but as I say, apart from when you're sleeping, you're going to be in the expedition lounge, you're going to be out on deck, you're going to be out on excursions. So really, for me, the cabins are just a place to rest your head, or if you want a little bit of peace and quiet, it's a good sanctuary. But as I say, we've got hot tub and sauna on both of the boats. Now, what is included in your cabin? So obviously all of the bedding, towels are provided. There's a hairdryer in each cabin. We also provide you with slippers. So the slippers are for you to wear around the ship. These are slippers you can wear inside the boat, but also out on deck as well, so you don't have to keep putting boots on. So those slippers do keep you really warm as well. But there's a number of plug sockets in your cabin, but also in the communal lounge areas, but they are European 2-pin type C plug sockets. They do have your adapters to hand. And in your cabin, in your bathroom, we have actually just signed a new deal with Rhapsodite. They're a Swedish organic skincare company. So yeah, there's going to be shampoo, conditioner, shower gel, body lotion, and hand soap as well. So don't feel like you have to bring your own products, and hopefully that saves you a little bit of space in your luggage. Now, quite importantly, so responsible travel and environmental impact. Obviously, we are heading into a very fragile ecosystem at the moment. So I just wanted to take a minute to explain some of the practices that we do follow on board. So we are members of AECO. Now, AECO is it's the governing body for cruise operators up in the Arctic. So we follow their laws and their regulations. But essentially, we leave the Arctic in the condition that we find it. So we don't pick wildflowers, we don't pick stones, we don't take any antlers or any bones. We want to leave the ecosystem as it is. And of course, we do not disturb the wildlife. So when we are viewing wildlife, we will be at a safe distance, a respectable distance to the wildlife. And we also will try and be as quiet as possible as well, so we're not disturbing it. But not only that, AECO, they do hold us responsible, and they give us guidelines on polar bear safety. Now, the 2 expedition guides on board the ship, they're fully trained in polar bear safety. So they will be carrying rifles and they will be carrying flare guns when we're out on excursions. Thankfully, we've never had to use them, but if there was ever an incident, we are fully prepared to keep you safe. And so Secret Atlas, we are part of other organizations as well. So 1% for the planet. So 1% of all of our revenue goes back into 1% for the planet. And now they are almost an umbrella charity. So the funds get distributed through a number of charities, but the focus of our funds is on sort of the polar regions and wildlife protection, and also marine protection as well. So that's just something Secret Atlas do. But when you're on the trip, what can you do? I've already mentioned sort of respectful wildlife viewing, but on all of our expeditions, so Svalbard, it's located at the end of the Gulf Stream. So there's a lot of rubbish which ends up on the Svalbard coast. So part of all of our expeditions, when we're out doing the hiking, doing the excursions, if we're seeing any plastics, if we're seeing any fisherman net, any rubbish which isn't meant to be there, then that we do take and we dispose of it properly. So yeah, we like to help where we can as well. But yeah, thank you. Hopefully that gives you a bit more of an insight into what to look forward to, and how to prepare for your expedition. Of course, if you do have any questions, let's go at secretatlas.com, or the phone numbers on our website, or I'm sure you've been in touch with either myself, Anna, or Cindy already. So yeah, we'll be more than happy to answer any of those questions. So yeah, we have a couple of questions come in on the chat. So with the new distance requirements, will a 600mm lens be needed for photography of polar bears? So this is a good question, and I will speak a little bit more about the new regulations. So there are regulations coming into place, where they're already in place, but they are essentially firstly, those regulations, they do limit the number of landing sites where cruise operators can go. But being a ship of under 40 people, we've got access to a lot more landing sites than some of the bigger ships. So from that instance, there's no change. But with wildlife, so we are restricted to how many meters. So on the coast of Svalbard, we're restricted to 500 meters or 300 meters to polar bears, dependent on the time of year. So we do need to keep that distance. Now, on some of our trips, and especially our photography trips, we will be heading up to the pack ice, or into the pack ice, should I say, further north. And as long as we are 12 nautical miles off the coast of Svalbard, we can get a little bit closer to the bears. Of course, there's no guarantee we're going to see the bears or find the bears, but we have probably a good chance of doing so. And we will be able to get a little bit closer. We're going to maintain a safe distance, but we'll be able to get a little bit closer if we're 12 nautical miles off the coast of Svalbard. But in the answer, do you need a 600mm lens? If you have one, if you have a zoom lens, I would definitely take it with you, even just for those close-up candid shots, or if you've got teleconverters. It's good to take a number of lenses. With photography, like if I'm going, I'll typically only take 2 lenses. I'll sort of take a wide angle, maybe like a sort of 35 to 80 mil, and then I'll take a bit more of a zoom lens as well, so I've got the choice. But when you're out in the Zodiacs, so there'll be 6 guests in the Zodiac, so you have got room for the photography equipment, but typically when you're going out, the guides will brief you of what we're likely to see, and they can recommend what lenses you take on each particular excursion, so you're not carrying multiple lenses. Another question is, do we need insect repellent? So no, in Svalbard we're not affected by insects. Okay, so yeah, another question we've had come in. I'm vegetarian. How well will I be catered for? So vegetarians are really well catered for. As I say, we've got the chef on board. As long as you've filled in your dietary requirements, we will cater for that. And then the vegetarian options are fantastic. So there's lots of fresh sort of fruit, vegetables, but also your vegetarian proteins are included as well. So really not to worry about that. And the chefs on board are fantastic. Our operations team have actually just done sample dinner menu. It's quite a nice perk of the job for them. So the chef was cooking the sample menu, and they said the food was fantastic, as it is every year. Is drone filming allowed? So drone filming is not allowed in Svalbard. So 95% of Svalbard is a national park. So 95% of Svalbard, you won't be able to fly a drone. And also being members of AECO, they don't allow drone filming. So yeah, the short answer, if you have a drone, it's probably best to leave it at home, because you're going to be very limited of where you can actually fly it in Svalbard. Should we take binoculars? That is a good question. So if you have your own binoculars, if you've got a set that you're used to and you like using, yeah, do bring your own. But we do have binoculars on the boats. They're all Opticron binoculars, so they're good binoculars. We also have a couple of scopes on each boat. So yeah, I'd say if I wouldn't go out of your way buying new binoculars or buying new equipment, because you can borrow the ones on the boat. But if you already have it, and yeah, definitely do bring binoculars. What footwear do you recommend around Svalbard? I'm on the end of April, start of May trip. So as I say, when you're on the ship, the muck boots are really great. But when you're in Svalbard, if you're there April, May, there's still going to be a little bit of snow around, a little bit of snow in the town on the ground. So yeah, I'd recommend a good pair of walking boots for that. If we bring, so this probably follows on from that question. So if we decide to bring our own hiking boots, should we bring ice grippers or micro spikes? It's a good idea if you're making excursions on the ice. They do give you extra stability, but yeah, I don't think it's 100% necessary. And if we are doing any sort of more extreme walks, or if you're doing any extra activities in Longyearbyen, those walks, the companies will tend to provide spikes. But yeah, it's not something I'd say which is necessary. But yeah, hiking boots and even the boots that we provide have got good grip on them. Is there a laundry service? So on both of the ships, we don't provide a typical laundry service, but if you do need some washing done, especially like if this is part of a longer trip, you may well need some laundry done. We do have sort of laundry facilities on board. So the crew of the boat, I can speak a little bit more about the crew, but the crew, we have there'll be a steward on every trip. So the steward or the stewardess, if you have laundry, just speak to them and they'll be more than happy to put it on. But yeah, typically we don't, there's not the facilities to wash sort of masses of laundry. So we sort of try and keep it to a minimum. But yeah, to speak about the crew on board, the crew on board are fantastic. So as I say, we've got the 2 expedition staff, but then on the ships there's a crew of 7 people. So we have the captain, the vice captain, we have the chief engineer, so there's an engineer on both of the ships, and then we have 2 ABs. Now the ABs, they're able-bodied seamen, so they're the ones who are sort of getting the Zodiacs ready, getting it in and out of the water, doing maintenance around the boat, keeping it in a nice tidy order. And then of course you have the chef. Some people say that's the most important person on the boat. The captain probably disagrees, but then you have the chef, and then you have the steward as well. So yeah, the crew are great. You'll get to know them. Being on a ship with just 12 passengers and 7 crew, you do really become close-knit and like a family. Any communication possible on the ship, i.e. internet? So yeah, good question. We have Starlink fitted on both ships. It is on 24 hours a day, so you can remain connected. It's very good for sort of WhatsApp messaging, calling home. If you need to check in your emails, you can. Personally, I quite like to switch off when you're up in the Arctic. There's not many places you can, but of course, you probably do need to check in home. But yeah, you've got internet access. It's free of charge. The only caveat to that, so there is a place in Svalbard where we do often do an excursion. It's in one of the fjords. It's called New Åsund. And that is a sort of government research base. And when we are going into that fjord, it's a beautiful fjord, so we often do go into it. And it's an interesting, there's a little settlement there as well. We have to turn off the Starlink and all communications. So the guides will make you aware if we are doing that, and that the Wi-Fi will be going off. But that's the only place where it isn't working. Do we have walking poles on board? We don't actually have walking poles, so if they are a good idea for their excursions for balance. So if you have some foldable ones, it's a good idea to bring them. Are the hikes on land steep and involve climbing? So yeah, this is a good question. So as I say before, every excursion, the guides will sit down, have a briefing with you, give you a little idea of what is involved. But typically we do tend to, if there is a particularly like an active set of people and a set of people who want a more gentle excursion, we try and accommodate for both people. So being a small group, we have got the flexibility to split the group up as well. So yeah, but the hiking, typically it's not extremely strenuous, especially in early season when there's lots of snow, lots of ice around. But in the summer season, it does open up a few more possibilities as the ice starts to melt. So yeah, the hiking is very mixed. But then the guides can really accommodate and make it work for you. So we got a question about activities in Longyearbyen if you're spending a few days. So it seems like there are winter activity in snowmobiling, dog sledging in early May. Yep. So the winter activities, so the snowmobiles, snow machines, and the dog sledding, it varies each year based on how much snow they've had and the temperatures. But yeah, typically those activities do end around May, early May. And then that opens up a lot more activities. But there are a lot of activities. There's companies which will do hiking activities. There's companies doing kayaking activities. But yeah, if you're staying in the shoulder season, sort of this particular question, mid-May, some of the hiking activities are fantastic from Longyearbyen. So yeah, I've actually yeah, I can see who's emailed the question. I just wanted to double check. I can put you in touch with one of the local companies, but there's glaciers you can hike to, there's ice caves you can hike to. So there's lots of activities, and that time of the year, you should, dependent on the ice conditions, you should be able to get out on kayaking excursions as well. But you can also visit some of the old coal mines, which are a really interesting place to visit. So yeah, for those activities, we'll put you in touch with the right people. And I think that brings us nicely to the end of the presentation. That is all of the questions that we've had come in. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And yeah, I really hope that's helped you prepare, helped you get a little bit more excited for your upcoming adventure. But as I say, we're going to be in touch a lot more in the build up to your trip. So do keep an eye on those inboxes. Let's go at secretatlas.com is where those emails are going to be coming from. As I say, this presentation is going to be shared with you, so you can read the slides and you can click on the links. But yeah, if you do have any questions, do feel free to give us a call. And closer to your voyage, you'll be put in touch with our local on-the-ground team in Svalbard as well. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, for joining. And yeah, we can't wait to welcome you on board either the Viking Fjord